Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
We take a closer look at NCBA's policymaking process and why it's important to members of the beef industry. Plus, you'll get a behind-the-scenes look at how beef producers lead the policymaking efforts at NCBA.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kevin Ochsner. Oftentimes, we as members of the beef industry get so busy taking care of things at home that we lose track of the important issues in Washington that could impact our lives and livelihoods. That's why the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is so valuable. The staff in D.C. work every day to protect the economic, political, and social interests of U.S. cattle producers so we can focus on our own operations. We had a chance to ask attendees at the recent Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA trade show about the value of NCBA's presence in Washington, D.C.
NCBA's legislative presence is vital to our existence in the cattle industry. Coming from Oklahoma, I actually sit as the legislative chairman for my state Cattlewomen's Association. So getting to take all of this knowledge of NCBA's legislative presence back to my home state, it does nothing but better our organization. Also, we need that presence on the ground in DC. Without someone there representing us, then how is our voices going to be heard on a national level?
Oh, it couldn't be worth more because I can't be there, you can't be there, and they're there for us, representing all of us, and with those kind of numbers behind them, their voice is going to be heard a lot more than mine would be individually or anybody else's.
I think it's a tremendous value. It allows us to ensure that our voices are being heard amongst the Congress representatives and allows us to ensure that our operations and industry will continue to thrive.
We've had the opportunity to be boots on the ground there, and the respect that NCBA has on the Hill. We don't always agree, but we're there for the discussion, and that's what it's all about, and to try to move forward united. And I've seen that respect firsthand of what our Washington D.C. team does, and as a beef producer, we all have to be grateful for that.
I think it's important to always have boots on the ground in all aspects. That's been one area that I'd love to get out more and see, because we have people that are fighting for farmers and fighting for what we do each day. We're just trying to bring a healthy, sustainable product to all consumers, and for people to fight for farmers who maybe have a smaller voice or a quieter voice, if you would, those people in Washington are doing invaluable work for us.
Us cowboys, we got cows to feed. We don't have time to go back there and represent ourselves and our industry. And so we need them, and they're very educated on the issues that are back there too.
NCBA does just so much work out there. I got to see it firsthand with the Young Cattlemen's Conference in 2019, seeing what all they do out there, and seeing it firsthand going to Capitol Hill. And just without their NCBA's presence out there, I don't think we might not be in business right now.
And joining us now to talk more about the policy-making process is NCBA President Todd Wilkinson. Todd, can you explain to our viewers just a little bit about how policy is actually formulated and developed within NCBA?
Kevin, that's probably the thing that gives me the greatest pride in NCBA is the fact that all our policy comes from the grassroots. You hear that term and you think, what does that mean? Right. Well, I can tell you from my perspective, it starts with my local cattlemen's affiliate coming up with ideas, passing it on up to their state cattlemen's association, and then that comes into meetings at NCBA where the issues are debated, and like minds get together and it's either passed or failed. But that's my marching orders, and that's the officers' marching orders, is the grassroots policy that comes from the ground, not from the top down. It comes from our producers.
And I think that's a common myth. Some people might think that you become president and you push forward the agenda that you have in your own mind's eye, but in reality, what is the role of volunteer leaders as it relates to executing against those policy decisions?
Literally, we take that policy and that's our roadmap.
Okay.
So we look at that roadmap and then try and stay in those guideposts. And as long as we can do that, we know we're working for the membership. And that's really, truly what we're all about.
You talk about membership. Obviously, a lot of our work is done in Washington, D.C. Why is having such a strong membership base so critical to our effectiveness on Capitol Hill?
Well, I can just relate it to something that happened to me recently. I flew in for a meeting in Washington, D.C., and I was sitting around with a group of other commodity organizations at a supper. And somebody came up and tapped me on the shoulder and turned around, and it was my senior senator. And obviously, to have a relationship with your senator and where I could call him out on some policy issues, that puts us in a unique position. So I don't know if all of our members realize how close they are to their representatives, and the fact that we have people in Washington, D.C. that can constantly stress those issues, that's the biggest part of it. The relationships is what get things done.
Indeed.
And it's those relationships in Washington, D.C. that get us over the finish line.
Now, I ask a lot of volunteer leaders this question because, quite honestly, over the last year or two, there's been issues where segments of the industry have been on opposite side. Packers, cattle feeders, cow-calf folks. Why, in your opinion, is it so important to have one organization that represents all of the beef industry from gate to plate?
Well, because if you just single out, and so I'm involved in multi-facets myself personally. I'm in a cow-calf operation with my son. I feed cattle in a feeding setting. You know, and if I just focused on one issue, then I'm ignoring all the other issues that go forward. And so often we say, well, this organization will claim to be the voice of the cow-calf producer. Well, what happens with the stocker, the feeder, and the retail and the packer segment? If we don't all act together, we're going to fall apart.
As they once said, I think it was Ben Franklin, we either all hang together or we'll all hang separately, right?
Yes, sir.
Last question. Why is now such an important time to be a member of NCBA?
Because the challenges that are there are not going to go away. And right now we're in a setting where everything is coming at us in a regulatory fashion. Congress can't agree on anything and get it passed. Now we're dealing with an administration that's going at us tooth and nail with new regulations. And the only way to fight regulations is either be in the courtroom or be involved in the process. And we're going to do a two-pronged approach, and we're going at them with both fists.
Thank you so much for the update, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
You can support the work being done for the beef industry by becoming a member of NCBA. You'll be sustaining the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C. It's easy to do. Just call 866-233-3872, or you can visit the website ncba.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll take you inside a special training session in Washington, D.C. for NCBA's new policy chairs and vice chairs.
In this week's Weather Watch, we're chatting about March. What are we expecting precip and temperature-wise for the month ahead? I'll see you in just a bit.
Getting to run a family farm is a dream come true. When you can grow good grass, there's opportunity to grow plenty of weeds. We want to use the tools that will help us do a better job. I would like the legacy to be that we took really good care of the land, and we truly did it as a passion, and we did our very best for the right reasons.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is the oldest cattle industry organization, working every day to defend your interests in Washington, D.C. And there are big benefits to being a member. You'll get news you can use in the National Cattlemen and policy updates from Beltway Beef, plus big discounts from John Deere, Cabela's, and more great partners. Join now. Call 866-233-3872 or sign up online at ncba.org.
NCBA's policy committees provide a means for cattle producers to discuss issues facing the beef industry and develop policies that direct the association's advocacy efforts in Washington. Here's a look at a recent training session in D.C. for the new policy chairs and vice chairs.
In mid-January, the conference room at NCBA's Washington office was packed with cattle producers who traveled in from across the country. They gathered to prepare for the year ahead, volunteering their time to serve as NCBA Policy Committee leaders.
This is a really exciting week for us here in Washington because it's truly the beginning of our policy process. We have our chairman and vice chairman here in Washington, D.C. to coordinate with their staff liaisons, plan out their work for the year, and really talk about where this association is going to go from a policy perspective in the months to come.
Yeah, the meeting we're attending this week is committee leadership training for our chairs and vice chairs of our 7 policy committees for the National Cattlemen's. It's a great opportunity to come into DC, have a 2-day learning opportunity to kind of go over some of the particulars of parliamentary procedure, but also do a lot of convention prep. We know we're talking about some of the policy that we're looking at bringing forth at convention.
As the oldest and largest national cattle industry organization, NCBA is the voice of America's cattlemen and women. NCBA's goal is to lead on the issues that matter to their members in all states.
We're working on 10 to 15 issues at all times, and those issues affect what you do on the farm every day or on the ranch every day. So it's very important that you be a member and have a voice in that membership also.
There's really, honestly, no better way to become involved in decision making that is going to affect you and your business than through NCBA. It's been a great experience for me, and I highly recommend it for all the producers out there, no matter what size your operation is.
The staff that works every day in NCBA's Washington office and out on Capitol Hill is guided by the NCBA policy book. That roadmap for all of NCBA's policy positions is developed, proposed, and approved by producers themselves.
NCBA is a grassroots organization. All the policy comes up from the grassroots. Most of it comes up through the state affiliates. The state affiliates send these policy resolutions to NCBA. We in our committees will discuss those, and if the members feel there's merit to these policies, they will adopt them.
NCBA is a grassroots organization, and that's how I ended up here. And I started out in the Wyoming Stock Growers, and before that I was an active member of a local county organization and worked my way and became involved and found it interesting to go to the state level, and from there I kept working and kept going, and I was interested in the federal lands and worked my way here. And so it starts at the bottom, which is the grass, and you form roots from there, and we come up with a national policy.
If you look around the room today, what you see are producers from all corners of the country and all different segments of the cattle industry who are giving up their time away from their families and operations to craft policy for this association, looking to the grassroots from coast to coast for inspiration for how we need to attack these issues in Washington, D.C. These really are the voices of cattle producers around the country, and that's where we get our policy direction from.
In 2023, one key area of focus for NCBA policy will be ensuring that a new farm bill avoids creating any new regulatory or market distortion that would place burdens on cattle producers. In addition, the goal is to be sure the farm bill includes the programs producers do want.
There's a lot of things in the farm bill that our producers use, such as in the conservation part about it. There's a lot of EQIP money out there that is being used for things that our producers ultimately use. There's also things in there like the CRP that's important, and things like how we react to drought and through the federal government. And so everything like that comes through the Farm Bill.
The producers who serve on NCBA policy committees will meet in person and over the phone several times throughout the year. And they'll work to make sure the NCBA professional staff that's on site every day in Washington has the direction they need to lead on cattle industry issues.
NCBA enjoys a reputation of leading on issues here in Washington, D.C. And our freedom and flexibility to do that and proceed aggressively on these issues is because we have the support of our cattle producers around the country to strongly advocate for their needs in Washington, D.C.
having the NCBA team here is very, very important to what we do on the policy side. They're here, they're good, they know what's going on, they have an ear open all the time and can put it back to the rural areas on what's going on. So it's very important to have them here, just as important to have the producers on the Hill also.
In Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Baxter reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
And joining me now is Ethan Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, we talked earlier in this show about the policy-making process at NCBA. Tell us how that process informs the priorities for you and your staff.
Well, there's no one on my team that doesn't have that policy book printed out on their desk. It's kind of our quick reference guide. And most of us know it by now. You know, you work with it for enough years, but that really is the beginning and end of every policy conversation in Washington. Whether we're educating a new member of Congress or reacting to a piece of legislation that may have unintended consequences for our members, that 150 some odd pages allows us to go in and cite for them specific areas and say the entire industry has looked at this. Cattlemen's associations from coast to coast have debated and voted, and this is the position of the industry on this particular issue. That is absolutely invaluable. It's not just us making it up as we go along, right? It's really speaking for hundreds of thousands of cattle producers around the country. So whether we're talking to the White House, whether we're talking to USDA, having that framework in place that really gives us clear guidance on how producers believe these issues should play out is critically important.
You mentioned education. I've always been impressed about some of the activities and events you do to educate both the White House as well as other lawmakers about the beef industry. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You know, these things tend to kind of take on a life of their own based on what the issue is. And sometimes that means getting some members of Congress out in the field where they can see these things firsthand. It's very different to talk about this in a hearing room in Washington, D.C. than to be boots on the ground somewhere around the country. Sometimes that's educating staff. You know, sometimes we do briefings up on the Hill where we can talk about a specific issue. You know, we're getting into the dietary guidelines process again. That's a big opportunity to talk about how important it is to keep beef at the center of the plate. There's always something new in Washington, and there's always, along with that, new staff rolling through, both in the White House and up on Capitol Hill. So the education process never stops, and we're always looking for creative ways to do that. Sometimes it takes the form of political advocacy, you know, with our political action committee and the events we host in our office in DC. Other times it's taking it to them in a legislative capacity where we're lobbying them. But this team is as good as it gets at making those switches depending on what's needed in any particular day.
And one of the common denominators is developing those good, solid relationships with lawmakers and regulators. Why are those relationships so important to your effectiveness?
If you're coming into an office cold and they don't know you and you don't know them, you're just not going to have as productive a conversation as if you've had years or months, in the case of some of these newer members, to build that level of trust, right? When I tell you something, you can count on the fact that I'm going to be leaning on my policy book. You can count on the fact that I'm going to be speaking not for myself, but for the members of this association. And building that trust that they can depend on what we say, we're going to do what we tell them we're going to do, and also that we're going to hold them accountable when they don't do what our producers want them to do. All of that fits into that bucket together, but that relationship building is job number one for our team. Even when there's nothing going on in a particular agency or a particular office, we're still out there talking to folks, having phone calls, you know, making sure we're in front of them and they know who we are, because a lot of times these issues can pop up and then they know who to call too. It's not always just us going to them.
Mm-hmm. So highlight, if you will, for our viewers, some of the key wins that you and your staff have had because of those solid, trusting relationships you've built over the years.
Sure. Well, you know, one of the things that has to happen every year is we have to fund the government. And that ends up being a really important opportunity for us to maintain some of the things that otherwise would be difficult to get done in Congress. Livestock hauling, hours of service, is always a big issue for us. And that looming threat of the electronic logging devices that are out there. We're able to use those relationships to maintain a block on that in those spending bills every year. Looking at greenhouse gas emissions reporting for livestock operations. You know, that's something that we talk about how much time we spend on something like WOTUS, you know, the EPA opening up another front there in an area that scientifically is almost impossible for them to do and doesn't achieve what they want them to achieve. We're able to attack things like that in spending bills. We're able to educate members of Congress and get bills moved in a direction that they're more helpful for our producers. Mm-hmm. And then there was those oddball things, you know, the rail strike last year that everybody was so worried about. We were talking about that last summer before anyone else knew that was going on. We were participating in calls, writing letters to the White House, and managing that issue behind the scenes. And a lot of times, that's really what that looks like. If we're doing our job, we should be able to keep issues from impacting producers before they ever even hear that they're happening. You know, we want to try to make sure that we're out there on the front line. That's a lot of what we do in Washington.
Preempting those issues before they become a big problem for all of us. One last question. For folks watching at home, what guidance and advice would you give them in terms of how they can support you and your staff's efforts in D.C.?
First and foremost, join NCBA, join your state association, and then, this is the thing I preach all the time, don't assume your neighbor is making that phone call. Don't assume that the guy next door is out advocating for this issue. Yeah. Don't assume it's like it is in your area of the country, everywhere else in the country. Your perspective is important. I was up in New York a few months ago at beef producers and talking about the fact that their business model is so much different than even one state either direction. Sure. And that's true everywhere in the country. So it's so critically important that our producers stand up and make their opinions heard and involve themselves in these processes all the way from the county to the national meetings.
On behalf of all of us as cattle producers, we thank you and your staff for all you do.
Thank you.
A great way to support NCBA's work in Washington, D.C., defending and advocating for the cattle industry, is to become a member. It's easy to do. Just call toll-free 866-233-3872, or you can visit the website ncba.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll talk with the new president of the American National Cattlewomen. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It is inevitable, like the rising and setting of the sun. Your gravel driveway will need maintenance. Drudgery? Never. Be the right person with the right tools doing the job the right way by watching How to Maintain a Gravel Drive Using a Box Blade with Hydraulic Scarifiers. Brought to you by tipsnotebook.com. When better how-to videos are made, we will make them.
Time now for Weather Watch, brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors and WSR Insurance.
Welcome to the Weather Watch. Matt Bacon's here. I hope it finds you doing well today. Let's chat more on La Nina. Over the last several weather watches, we've talked kind of theoretically about La Nina going away, but now we can actually apply some visuals to seeing that area of ocean beginning to warm up. So I'll show you that first off, and then how it applies to March. What can you expect in March in terms of temperatures and precipitation? So again, as you look at sea surface temperatures across the globe, where they're warmer or colder than average dictates where the storms are. A hot ocean provides energy to the atmosphere, and that's where you have storminess. We've had colder than normal conditions here. These black boxes, that's where we look for La Nina or El Nino. Of course, we've been in La Nina, which is colder. And that takes away storms from this part of the equator, which then downstream takes away storms elsewhere, like around North America. So our drought increases when we have La Nina. So that's the region we're going to be watching. Now we actually have a visual to apply to this weakening of La Nina. So let's do that now. If we look at La Nina as it is right now, the past week is right in here. And as I go back 4 weeks, I'll go week number 1 is right now, and then let's go back for 4 weeks. And you're going to see this area of ocean in here beat into the deeper blues over the past 4 weeks. And this area of reds, as we come back closer to forward in time, is increasing. So we've finally begun to see some visual changes in the ocean conditions. So we're starting to warm things up there in the equatorial Pacific, and that means La Nina is fading away. For March through May, your spring, likely a neutral phase. How does this play out for March, say? So if you look at March, and how it plays out historically and what may be coming through, we'll classically get cold conditions off to the west coast and mild for the plains and off to the east. This year's a little different because we have so much snowpack and ice on some of the northern plains. So I've adjusted that March forecast a bit. Still cold for the west, colder than normal there, but moderated the temperatures, in some cases cooler than normal across the plains due to that snowpack being on the ground. Let's take a look at precipitation. And I think the Northwest in pockets will still have some moisture. California in some areas will still carry quite a bit of moisture for March. Some of the central and southern plains may catch some water as well. But the driest area is likely the farther south and west that you can go. South Texas, southern Florida, likely the driest areas. That's this week's Weather Watch. I hope it finds you well. We'll see you the next time.
Weather Watch is brought to you by Ag Risk Advisors, with you no matter the weather. And by WSR Insurance, providing insurance solutions for more than a century. Visit their websites for more details.
And joining us now is Jeff Simmons. He's CEO of Elanco Animal Health. Elanco has a long history of partnership with the beef cattle industry and a strong commitment to sustainability. Jeff, thanks for coming today.
Great to be here. Great to be in New Orleans.
You have had such a long time personal commitment to sustainability, but more importantly, you've made sustainability part of your core values at Elanco. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, you know, I think it's the intersection of a lot of things happening right now. And I think to all cattlemen, we need to back up and remember the basics. I kind of simplified into three numbers, 50, 60, and 7. 50 is, hey, United Nations numbers globally, animal protein has grown 50% the last decade. Record numbers of consumption just last year. Sometimes you hear all the noise, you wonder, geez, the world wants what we have. The next decade, it's expected to grow another 50%. More calories needed in some continents and better calories with less carbs needed here. Now we've got less cattle. So 50% more, that's the charge. The second is 60%. And the 60 number comes back to 60% of the world's getting the wrong calories. Either not enough, Africa, India, others where they need more calories, especially protein calories, or Western world getting the wrong calories. How many people are on Atkins, Whole30? Carbs are down, protein's up. So that feeding the world the right calories, giving them what they want, 50% more protein, and then comes to the third number, 7. The United Nations says we got 7 years to start to change the temperature and the slowing of the temperature rises, and that's got to be reversed. And that leads to the way to do that in greenhouse gases is methane. Methane is a short-lived gas. Carbon's the long one. 1,000 years for carbon. Methane, you're talking about something that can be done in a decade. And we can impact methane, but you can't disconnect calories and climate. We can't change the world's diet. We got to feed this world, over 8 billion people, and we got to cool the climate.
And a lot of that's going to rely on the U.S. cattle industry, which of course is the most productive beef industry in the world. I'm curious to know your thoughts. We hear a lot from a lot of people criticizing the U.S. beef industry. Why is sustainability so critical to the U.S. beef industry?
It is absolutely essential. I think in our business in animal health, it's the next biggest animal health opportunity. Why? This is data, these are facts. First of all, we need cattle. Cattle are grazing and using 80% of land that wouldn't be used, turning it into protein. We know that. So trying to, I say to Bill Gates and others, good ideas, but let's put our energy to climate neutral farming. We heard from a speaker last night, a cattleman, that's saying, hey, they're receiving dollars from carbon, and everyone is starting to say, hey, in the next decade, we're going to start to hear about climate neutral farms, meaning they're capturing as many emissions as they're creating. Now we're getting protein on a climate neutral farm. That's where Bill Gates, innovators, everybody, come on, we welcome the energy there. And that to me is the cattleman's great opportunity. It's an economic opportunity. It's a social opportunity. It's an advocacy opportunity. Some of our greatest adversaries the last 10 years are now at the gate, even calling us, saying, hey, this might be the way to get there.
That's really encouraging news. Yeah. So you've put your money where your mouth is, and you've sponsored the Sustainability Forum at the Cattle Industry Convention. What do you hope to accomplish with efforts like that?
Yeah, I think as myself, one of my goals to my board of directors is spending so much time every month educating myself about this new topic. I think all of us can say, oh, this environmental movement, and can it really be the case? And how can carbon become dollars? Can it really be dollars? And how does it come into an operation? So what we're trying to do with this summit the last few years here is an opportunity for the people that are in the center of it, the leaders, the pioneers, are actually educating. And it's just another form of education. Education then leads to advocacy. We got to be smart. We're a science-based, data-driven, we know there's no one better than the cattlemen to know how to take care of the animal and take care of the land. We've been environmentalists for a long time in this industry. So we come with credibility, but we got to educate, and be able to lean in. So that's the summit's a lot about advocacy and education and building allies.
Outstanding. And you talk about data-driven.
Yeah.
Of course, you're familiar that the beef industry set a set of specific goals, sustainability goals. How is Elanco positioned to support those?
Yeah, we've leaned in, we've invested. Our strategy is very clear, and we've shared it a lot. I went on a tour in the fourth quarter across the cattle industry and working with producers and packers and getting alignment here. This is what we're doing. One, products. It's what we do. Enteric methane. We got the first environmental claim product with Experior through the FDA. So we're working on products and even existing products, the label claims, to be able to move to much more of a footprint driven. Okay. Yeah, productivity is needed, but productivity, we all know, drives better footprint. So one is our products and bringing products. We just licensed Bovaer, which could be 30 to 50% in the cattle industry of lowering methane. So pipeline products, everything. The second is data. Everyone in every cattle operation has got to understand, this is a charge to everybody out there, what is your footprint now? How many emissions are coming off and how do you cast that? We've launched and we've got a large analytics capability to manage that. Third then, is we've put some seed funding into a company that actually called Athean that will spin out to actually capture and aggregate the data independently, certify the data, and monetize for that farm that carbon movement into dollars back to them. And that's moving. And then I think last, the fourth pillar strategy is advocacy. So it's all about products, it's about analytics, it's about monetization, and it's about advocacy. That's our commitment. I've never in 33 years, I think, standing in the NCBA meeting here, been more excited about the world wants what we do. The world actually, and adversaries and everyone sees us now as environmentalists. The opportunity's never been greater. Now we've got to lean in and do it.
That's a great challenge to all of us. Thank you for the leadership you and Elanco provide for our industry.
It's great to be in this industry. Thank you.
To keep up with Elanco's commitment to sustainability, follow Jeff Simmons on LinkedIn. There were actually 3 beef industry groups gathered at the 2023 Cattle Industry Convention in New Orleans: NCBA, the Cattlemen's Beef Board, and the American National Cattlewomen, also known as ANCW. Joining us now is Pamela Griffin. She's an Arizona rancher and president of ANCW. Pam, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you said that your presidential platform is Make a Difference. And I'm curious, what would you tell all of us about how we can make a difference for the beef cattle industry?
I think there's a couple of different things, Kevin. Make a difference to me is by one thought, by one action, and one good intention. There's so many things we can do, sharing our stories, sharing with consumers in the store. I've had that happen. Shared recipes with a consumer that saw I was wearing a beef shirt. Additionally, I think membership is vital. Whether you choose to be an active member or just a member and pay your dues, it's so important to leadership to be able to represent you.
So ANCW just celebrated its 70th anniversary. What do you see for the future of the organization?
I see ANCW as a premier organization and resource for women in agriculture and the cattle industry across the country. Our 3 pillars are beef promotion, education, and legislation. Last year, we went as a separate entity, NCBA, to the NCBA offices and went out to speak to our legislators, which was quite impactful. We are working on different things for education, not only for our collegiates and our younger folks, but we also provide a program called WILD, which is Women in Leadership and Development.
Oh, neat.
We have that on our website, and they can learn things like how to address their legislators, how to hold proper meetings, and that's all available to women who are members.
That's outstanding. Now, speaking of being a member, my understanding is you've been a member for well over 10 years. What drew you to ANCW initially, and what guidance would you give other young ladies who may want to do the same?
I grew up on what I would be considered a hobby farm. Both of my parents left agriculture. My father left the family's meat and farming from North Muskegon. And my mom's family's grain operation is still active in Monroeville, Indiana, but she left as well. We had a large array of livestock, and being the oldest, I had to take care of them, and I always gravitated more to the outdoors. I met my husband, we married. The family has an operation outside of Globe, Arizona.
Okay.
And it's a cow-calf operation. And we wanted to start our own. So he told me that we could do that, but I had to be the majority owner and had to do a lot of
the work.
Yes. So he cares for my cattle, our cattle.
Yeah.
They're his and mine. But I started resourcing women. And what I noticed that the women that I looked up to, the women I resourced, were American National Cattle women. So, and I felt a larger obligation than just owning cattle. I felt I needed to have a voice and I needed to participate. So I joined American National Cattle Women, and I haven't regretted a day of it.
And look at you now. Speaking of women, my understanding is you're very, very passionate about the young cattle women as well. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. We were so excited to see some of the young ladies at our meetings just the past couple of days. It seems like a much larger group. But I'm interested in the youth, the junior members, and reaching out to them and bringing them into the fold because they are our future.
Well, thank you so much for all you do for our industry. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
American National Cattle Women serves as a voice for women who share a passion for the beef community. To find out more information about the group, just go to the website ancw.org. Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll show you an operation in Nevada that's improving the land for future generations. That story when we return. Stay with us.
Have you taken a hard look at the performance of your cow herd? More producers are turning to the proven genetics offered by Gelbvieh and Balancer females.
We like the Balancers just because they're really good mamas, they got good feet and good udders.
So the reason that we started using the Balancer genetics is to create the perfect hybrid female. To have that composite hybrid female that lasts a long time, has moderate mature status, and highly fertile.
Moderate-framed Gelbvieh and Balancer females stay in your herd longer and offer outstanding performance.
Gelbvieh and Balancer females are really known for their fertility, for their longevity, and for the ability to raise heavy weaning calf year after year.
Make the smart, sustainable, and profitable choice with Gelbvieh and Balancer females. Find out more at gelbvieh.org.
Welcome back. Every day, cattlemen and women care for their land and their animals. They do so because they're committed to improving natural resources and the environment. Today, we're continuing our series celebrating the 2022 regional winners of the Environmental Stewardship Award. Let's head to Nevada and introduce you to the award-winning operation from Region 6.
Cattle managed well can be a very, very useful tool. I go out and I look in the Bodie Hills where I'm running these cattle, and the air is clean, the water is clean, the land is healthy, and it's being utilized in a very functional way.
I'm Stephen Fullstone from Smith Valley, Nevada. I'm a sixth-generation Nevadan. My family's been here since the 1850s. We raise cattle, we raise a lot of alfalfa, grass hay.
I love being out on a horse moving cattle. Being out in the ecosystem in the middle of nowhere with cows is one of the best feelings. Being able to do it with my family, with my dad, is just amazing.
I'm Annette Fullstone, and Stephen and I are sister and brother. We're siblings, and Emily's my niece. She's the young generation that can bring new innovative things to my brothers in my generation.
So we run a cow-calf operation, Angus Hereford Cross cattle. We are right on the border of California and Nevada on the eastern slope of the Sierras, and our cattle go up into the Sierra Mountains on permits and private land for the summer months.
When you're out there and you watch the cattle, there's actually a tremendous amount of feed out there. They eat a lot of the brush that is out there. We pay very close attention to our utilization on our ranges. We really work on moving our cattle, and you can see responses in the grass as long as you don't overgraze them. We want to live on this land for generations. We have to take care of it. In the last 15 years, there's been a lot of work done where we have removed pinyon and juniper trees.
What you do is if you eliminate that plant, you're gonna basically raise the water table so that more grasses and more shrubs are available.
The removal of the juniper in the Bodie Hills has only improved the environment for both our cattle and for the sage grouse, improving the grass that's growing up, improving the ecosystem that works for both.
So some of the projects that we really worked on were mostly habitat restoration, creating better environments for meadow, riparian meadows.
It was that massive head cut that we were looking to repair. It had really washed out. There was little to no grass growing.
We used a backhoe. We cut a head cut barrier. We put this felt liner to allow water to flow through, but the sediment is collected, and then we lined it with rock.
It's tremendous to see how quickly that healed itself. That landscape really came back from being just this washed out, eroded, dry creek bed to now this lush meadow that constantly runs water. My dream for the future of this ranch is to continue to work on our regenerative practices, to be more sustainable in every aspect. We want better food, better environment, better waterways, better air, a better future.
Our cattle are very beneficial to the land. We are probably raising the best source of protein you can on the environment that we're on, private land, public land. I think it's a renewable resource that we have, and it's probably the highest and best use of the land.
When we come back, we'll introduce you to an award-winning operation in South Dakota that has made stewardship and conservation a priority. That story when we return. Stay with us.
Cattle producers across the country work hard to care for their animals and their land. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service is there to help. Find out how you can work with NRCS to develop a conservation plan for your operation. Find possible funding resources for implementing conservation practices, or get free expert advice on ways to improve your farm or ranch. Visit the website nrcs.usda.gov today.
Cattlemen and women are dedicated to managing their land and cattle in a sustainable way. They want to leave a legacy for future generations. For more than 30 years, the Environmental Stewardship Award has worked to honor these caretakers of the land and to share their stories. To find out more and to learn how you can nominate a farm or ranch for the Environmental Stewardship Award, visit the website environmentalstewardship.org.
Welcome back. We're bringing you some great stories about those who make their living on the land and their outstanding conservation efforts as we honor the 2022 Environmental Stewardship Award regional winners. Now, let's introduce you to the Region 7 winner in South Dakota.
We can't have a good, clean environment without cattle. They are not polluters. They are the ones that actually let that system grow and flourish. Hi, I'm Brian Jorgensen. I'm the Chief Agronomy Operations Officer here at Jorgensen Land and Cattle, and we're from Ideal, South Dakota. We have 4 partners, myself, my brother Greg, my nephew Cody, and my son Nicholas.
My great-grandfather homesteaded here in 1909, They've been here ever since. Myself and my cousin Nicholas will be 4th generation. I have 2 boys and a daughter, which would be the 5th generation, and Nicholas has 4 boys that could someday be part of the operation as well.
Jorgensen Land and Cattle has been in the black Angus cattle business for, it'll be close to 70 years. Most of what we do is we merchandise bulls. We'll probably lease or sell somewhere around 5,250 bulls, which makes us the largest seed stock producer in the United States.
It was not our goal to be the #1 bull producer in the United States, but it happened, and I think it happened because we just put out a really good product.
Soil health is a principal part of everything that we do in our operation every day. And so we have to do everything that we know and have power to do to sustain that and build the health of that soil.
The only way to do that is to have a hoof running on farmland. Have a cow or a bull, some sort of a ruminant running on that farm ground.
And one of the major ways we found to improve soil health is rotational grazing. We've been supplementing that with a GPS grazing collar. I can get on my computer in my office and I can draw a fence and then instruct the collar to tell them to stay there. So in a rotational grazing scenario, where we would have to go to a pasture and string up polywire, right, if we wanted to subdivide it in some way, we don't have to do that now.
We can graze cattle, where you can't put a fence in effectively. So we can actually graze some spots of land on our property that we may have never used before.
Sustainability has been an important part of our operation for decades. And I think it's a great thing for us because I think it's going to be what powers us into the future.
It's a passion of our families to leave the land better than what you had found it when you first started operating it. And if everybody thinks that way, then I think this whole world will be a better place.
We never feel like we've reached the end of the road. Our family has always believed that we can do better. So we're always going to try and look for things that will improve whatever resource we have available to us.
We're always looking for new innovative ways to make our place better. And if we can do that, I think we can continue on for a long, long time.
When we return, we'll look at how NCBA celebrated a historic milestone in New Orleans. That story is just ahead.
That certain time in the day when you can take a deep breath, knowing your work is done. That's the feeling Aspen products can create. Cost-effective alternatives to name brands that deliver the same results. Qualaxin is one of them. Use it to prevent and treat respiratory disease in your herd. Then breathe easy. Find them at Animal Health International.
If you're connected with the beef cattle business, then you should like the NCBA page on Facebook. The NCBA Facebook page shares photos, news, and valuable information about the beef cattle industry. You can also follow the NCBA Twitter feed at Beef USA. So stay in touch with NCBA on Facebook and Twitter.
You have an upcoming production sale to advertise? Then contact the Cattlemen to Cattlemen marketing team or your breed association to learn more.
Over the past several weeks, we've been bringing you coverage from the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show in New Orleans. It was also the 125th anniversary of NCBA. Here's a special look at this historic occasion.
Most of the cattlemen and women attending the 2023 Cattle Industry Convention may not have realized they're part of a tradition that goes all the way back to 1898. But for some, it's clear NCBA is built on a firm 125-year-old foundation.
The individuals that have come before us, that have worked hard to build the programs, have set a foundation to allow us to grow and build. If you're not an NCBA member, going out and doing your best to push forward the legacy of those left behind, well, then you won't have an opportunity to leave one for those going forward.
Producers first joined together at the National Stock Growers Convention in Denver. The name of the organization has evolved since then, but today's National Cattlemen's Beef Association still has the goal of giving America's cattle producers a strong, unified voice. The challenges facing cattle producers today are just as tough as they were 125 years ago, and in his speech to NCBA board members, new President Todd Wilkinson issued a call to action.
And I ask you, are you willing to take the challenge? Are you willing to fight for your family, fight for your livestock, fight for your land? Are you going to step into the ring? Together and united as an industry, we can beat any challenge.
The first president of the national organization was John W. Springer, a Colorado rancher who served from 1898 to 1903. When NCBA CEO Colin Woodall spoke to NCBA board members in New Orleans, he looked back to those early years when Springer was the cattle organization president.
He had a quote that I want to read. "Those who are continually looking backward for inspiration, who are chock full of calamity forebodings, who thrive on opposition to any and all measures, who are constantly quoting ancient history, are not fit to lead progressive, enterprising 20th century Americans." And it was that challenge, it was that recognition that we always have to be the forefront of the issues. We have to look at ways to improve, that we have to look at ways to debate and then move forward, is the whole reason we're sitting here today. We are the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and for the next 125 years, we will continue to be the trusted leader and definitive voice of our great industry. Mr. President, that's my report. Thank you.
Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.